Sarah sat quietly in seat 12B, reading a cooking magazine. Nobody knew she was a pilot with 8,000 flight hours. When both engines exploded at 32,000 feet and the crew begged for help over the intercom, the woman everyone ignored became their only hope for survival. Sarah Chin sat quietly in seat 12B, looking exactly like any other passenger on Flight 447. She wore faded blue jeans and a comfortable navy sweater, her long black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She had no pilot uniform, no aviation badges, no wings pin on her jacket. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was different from the other 142 people traveling on this Tuesday morning flight from Chicago to Denver. She was reading a cooking magazine and sipping black coffee from a small plastic cup. The magazine was open to a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Sarah loved to bake when she had free time at home. Flying airplanes was her profession, but cooking was her passion and hobby. Today she deliberately chose not to think about aviation, airports, flight schedules, or anything related to her job as a commercial pilot. The Boeing 737-800 was cruising smoothly at 32,000 feet above the American Midwest. Through the small oval windows, passengers could see white, puffy clouds scattered far below like cotton balls on a blue carpet. The twin engines mounted under the wings hummed steadily with their familiar deep roar. Everything felt normal and peaceful. Sarah had specifically chosen this flight because it would be quiet and relaxing. She wanted to simply be a regular passenger for once, traveling to visit her elderly parents in Denver. It was her first real vacation in nearly 10 months. She had been working overtime flights, covering for sick pilots, and completing her annual training requirements. She deserved this break. "Can I get you anything else to drink?" asked Jenny, a young flight attendant with shoulder-length blonde hair and a warm, professional smile. "No, thank you. The coffee is perfect," Sarah replied politely, looking up briefly from her magazine before returning to the cookie recipe. Jenny moved her beverage cart down the narrow aisle to serve other passengers. Sarah turned the page to read about making apple pie from scratch. She imagined baking pies with her mother this weekend, just like they used to do when Sarah was a little girl, long before she ever dreamed of becoming a pilot. The man sitting next to her in seat 12A was a middle-aged businessman named Mike, according to his name tag. He was typing nervously on his silver laptop, frequently checking his expensive gold watch. His hands were shaking slightly, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead despite the cool cabin temperature. "Excuse me," Mike said to Sarah, his voice tense with anxiety. "Is it normal for these planes to make so much noise? The engines sound really loud to me." Sarah glanced up from her magazine and listened for a moment. "Yes, that's completely normal. That's just the sound of healthy engines working properly. They're designed to be quite powerful." Mike nodded but still looked deeply worried. "I have to confess, I don't fly very often, maybe twice a year for business meetings. This whole experience makes me incredibly nervous. Being 32,000 feet up in the air just doesn't feel natural to me." "I understand your feelings," Sarah said kindly, "but these modern commercial aircraft are extremely safe. Statistically, flying is much safer than driving your car to the airport. The pilots have years of training, and the planes are maintained by expert mechanics." She spoke with quiet confidence but didn't reveal that she was herself a commercial airline pilot with United Airlines. She didn't mention her 8,000 hours of flight time, her military aviation background, or her extensive training in emergency procedures. Today she just wanted to be Sarah, the passenger, not Captain Chin, the pilot. 3 rows behind them, a young mother named Lisa was struggling with her 6-month-old baby boy. The infant had been crying for the past 20 minutes, his tiny face red and scrunched up with discomfort. Other passengers were starting to look annoyed by the constant noise. "It's okay, sweetie," Lisa whispered to her baby, gently rocking him back and forth. "Mommy's here. Everything is fine." Sarah turned around in her seat to help. "Try giving him a bottle or pacifier," she suggested kindly. "Babies' ears hurt during flights because of the air pressure changes. Swallowing helps equalize the pressure in their ears." "Thank you so much," Lisa said gratefully, reaching into her diaper bag for a bottle. "Are you a mother yourself? You seem to know about babies and flying." "No, I'm not a mother," Sarah replied. "I just travel frequently for work, so I've observed what helps babies feel more comfortable during flights. She didn't explain that during her years as a commercial pilot, she had watched thousands of passengers deal with air pressure problems. She had learned to recognize the signs and solutions, but she kept this professional knowledge to herself today. Meanwhile, in the cockpit at the front of the aircraft, Captain Rodriguez and First Officer Thompson were conducting their routine in-flight checks. Captain Rodriguez was an experienced aviator with graying hair and over 25 years of flying commercial jets. First Officer Thompson was much younger, perhaps 30 years old, but highly skilled and excellently trained. "Beautiful weather conditions today," observed Captain Rodriguez, scanning the instrument panel, where dozens of dials, switches, and digital displays showed the status of every aircraft system. "Perfect flying weather all the way to Denver," agreed First Officer Thompson, updating their flight plan on the computer. "Clear skies, light winds, no turbulence expected. Passengers should have a very smooth ride." All of their engine instruments showed normal readings. Fuel flow was steady and appropriate. Oil pressure and temperature were within normal ranges. Every system on the aircraft appeared to be functioning perfectly. Neither pilot had any reason to expect problems. However, deep inside the left engine mounted under the aircraft's wing, microscopic cracks were forming in one of the critical turbine blades. This particular blade had been subjected to thousands of hours of extreme heat, tremendous pressure, and high-speed rotation. Over time, the repeated stress had weakened the metal structure. Metal fatigue was slowly but steadily making the blade more brittle and fragile. Sarah's trained ears detected a subtle change in the engine sound that most passengers would never notice. The pitch of the left engine had shifted slightly, indicating a small variation in its rotation speed. She looked up from her cooking magazine and listened carefully for several seconds. The change was barely perceptible, but Sarah's thousands of hours in cockpits had trained her to recognize even tiny variations in engine performance. She glanced toward the window, trying to see the engine, but her seat position didn't provide a clear view. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she was being too sensitive because of her professional background. She tried to return her attention to the magazine article about apple pie ingredients, but part of her mind remained alert and listening. In the cockpit, First Officer Thompson also heard something unusual. "Captain, did you notice any change in engine number 2? He asked, pointing to the engine instruments. Captain Rodriguez listened carefully and studied the dials. "What kind of change do you mean? I thought I detected a slight variation in the sound, maybe a small change in RPM." Both pilots examined their engine instruments more closely. All the gauges and digital readouts still indicated completely normal operation. Oil pressure was steady. Exhaust gas temperature was within limits. Fuel flow remained constant. "Everything looks perfectly normal on the instruments," said Captain Rodriguez. "Sometimes these engines have minor variations in sound that don't indicate any actual problems. It's probably nothing to worry about." But it wasn't nothing. The crack in the turbine blade was growing larger and more dangerous with each passing minute. The blade was approaching the point where it would fail catastrophically. Sarah was reading about measuring flour for pie crust when the first engine exploded. A tremendously loud bang echoed through the entire aircraft, followed immediately by violent shaking that threw passengers against their seat belts. Coffee cups flew through the air. Magazines scattered on the floor. Several passengers screamed in terror. "Oh my God, what was that?" shouted Mike, his face turning completely white with fear. Sarah's pilot training automatically took control of her reactions. While other passengers panicked, she remained calm and immediately began analyzing the situation. She looked out her window and saw thick black smoke streaming from the left engine. Pieces of metal were clearly missing from the engine housing. "Engine failure," she said quietly to herself, being careful not to alarm the passengers around her. She knew exactly what had happened. The turbine blade had finally broken apart, destroying the engine in the process. This was a serious emergency, but not necessarily life-threatening. Commercial aircraft were designed to fly safely on just one engine. In the cockpit, red warning lights flashed frantically across the instrument panel. Loud alarm bells rang continuously. Both pilots immediately began emergency procedures they had practiced hundreds of times in flight simulators. "Engine 2 failure," announced First Officer Thompson urgently. "Complete loss of power. Captain Rodriguez took control of the aircraft and began the emergency checklist. His first priority was to maintain control and prevent the plane from rolling or yawing due to the asymmetric thrust from the remaining engine. Declaring emergency, he said, reaching for his radio microphone. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday! This is United Flight 447 Heavy. We have experienced an engine failure and are requesting immediate priority handling for emergency landing." The voice of the air traffic controller responded within seconds. "Flight 447, Mayday received. Turn right, heading 090. Descend and maintain flight level 280. Kansas City International Airport is approximately 85 nautical miles at your 2 o'clock position. Emergency equipment is being alerted." Flight attendant Jenny picked up the intercom microphone to address the increasingly nervous passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have experienced a minor mechanical issue with one of our engines. This is not dangerous, as these aircraft are designed to operate safely on a single engine. The captain has requested priority handling for our approach into Kansas City. Please make sure your seat belts are securely fastened and remain seated. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for possible emergency procedures." But Jenny's calm announcement didn't fool the passengers. Many had seen the smoke and fire from the damaged engine. People were beginning to cry, pray, and comfort each other. The cabin filled with worried voices and nervous energy. Sarah unbuckled her seat belt and stood up despite the instruction for everyone to remain seated. "Where are you going?" Mike asked desperately. The flight attendant said we should stay in our seats. "I just need to check on something," Sarah replied calmly. She walked toward a window where she could get a better view of the damaged left engine. What she saw concerned her greatly. The engine was severely damaged, with significant pieces of the turbine housing missing. Thick black smoke continued streaming from the wreckage. But Sarah's biggest worry wasn't the engine that had already failed, she was concerned about the remaining engine. If the same metal fatigue problem existed in both engines, they could lose their only remaining source of power. Her fears became reality exactly 8 minutes later. Deep inside the right engine, the identical metal fatigue problem that had destroyed the left engine was reaching its critical failure point. Another turbine blade, weakened by thousands of hours of stress, developed a crack that quickly spread through the entire blade. The second explosion was even louder and more violent than the first. The aircraft shook so severely that passengers were thrown against the cabin walls. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as the plane suddenly began descending. In the cockpit, both pilots stared at their instruments in complete disbelief. "Engine 1 failure," shouted Thompson. "Both engines are gone. We have no power." "That's impossible," exclaimed Captain Rodriguez. But the instruments clearly showed zero thrust from both engines. "We're in a total power-off glide situation." The change in the cabin was immediate and terrifying. The steady, comforting roar of the engine stopped completely. The aircraft became eerily quiet except for the whistling sound of air flowing over the fuselage. Passengers could feel the plane beginning to descend steadily. "We're going to crash," screamed one passenger. "Oh God, we're all going to die," cried another. Panic spread rapidly through the cabin as people realized both engines had failed. Parents hugged their children. Strangers held hands. Many passengers began praying desperately. Sarah knew she couldn't remain anonymous any longer. Lives depended on her expertise. She walked quickly toward the front galley, where Jenny was frantically trying to contact the cockpit. "Both engines are out, aren't they?" Sarah asked quietly. Jenny looked surprised by her knowledge. "How could you possibly know that? I can't even reach the pilots on the intercom. They must be incredibly busy right now. They're working through emergency checklists for dual engine failure," Sarah explained. "Listen carefully. I need to speak with the captain immediately. This is a matter of life and death for everyone on this aircraft." "I'm sorry, but regulations prohibit passengers from entering the cockpit during emergencies," Jenny replied, though her voice showed uncertainty. Sarah took a deep breath. The time for anonymity was over. "My name is Captain Sarah Chin. I'm a commercial airline pilot with United Airlines. I have over 8,000 hours of flight time, including extensive training in emergency procedures and dual-engine failure scenarios. I've flown this exact type of aircraft for 6 years. The captain and first officer need my assistance immediately if we're going to save everyone on this plane." Jenny stared at her in shock. You're really a pilot, but you're dressed like a regular passenger. I'm deadheading home on my vacation, Sarah explained quickly, but my day off doesn't matter now. In a dual-engine failure, every minute counts. We need to work together as a team if we want to survive this emergency. Jenny hesitated for only a few seconds, then made the most important decision of her career. Follow me to the cockpit. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Rodriguez and First Officer Thompson were working through emergency procedures as quickly as possible. Sweat poured down their faces as they struggled with the unprecedented situation. Current rate of descent is 1,800 feet per minute, Thompson reported. At this rate, we have approximately 17 minutes before ground impact. Kansas City International is still 78 miles away, Rodriguez calculated. We cannot glide that distance. We need alternatives immediately. Jenny knocked on the reinforced cockpit door and spoke through the intercom system. Captain Rodriguez, there's a passenger who identifies herself as a commercial pilot. She's requesting permission to assist with the emergency. Absolutely not, Rodriguez replied sharply. We don't have time to deal with passengers right now. We're trying to save everyone's life. Sarah took the intercom microphone from Jenny. Captain Rodriguez, this is Captain Sarah Chin, United Airlines. I've been monitoring your situation from the cabin. You need to optimize your glide performance immediately to maximize distance. I have extensive experience with emergency procedures and can assist you. There was a long pause as Rodriguez considered this unexpected development. What are your qualifications, Captain Chin? He asked. 8,000 total flight hours, primarily on Boeing 737 and Airbus A320 aircraft. I'm current on emergency procedures, including dual-engine failure scenarios. I've completed simulator training for exactly this type of situation multiple times. I believe I can help you save this aircraft and everyone aboard. Rodriguez looked at Thompson, who nodded encouragingly. Permission granted. Enter the cockpit immediately, Rodriguez decided. The cockpit door opened, and Sarah stepped into the confined space filled with blinking lights, computer screens, and urgent activity. She immediately began assessing the situation by scanning the instrument panel and flight management system. What's your current configuration and airspeed? She asked professionally. Flaps retracted, landing gear up. Airspeed 290 knots, Thompson replied. You need to slow immediately to 240 knots, Sarah advised. That's the optimal glide speed for your current weight. Every knot of excess speed reduces your glide distance. Rodriguez adjusted the aircraft's pitch attitude, and their airspeed decreased to the recommended setting. Almost immediately, their rate of descent improved from 1,800 feet per minute to 1,500 feet per minute. What airports are within our glide range? Sarah asked, studying the GPS navigation display. Kansas City was our original destination, but we can't reach it, Thompson explained. There's a smaller regional airport about 45 miles ahead, but that's still questionable. Sarah thought quickly, drawing on her knowledge of the area. What about alternative landing sites? Are there any major highways with long, straight sections? Highway landing, Rodriguez asked with surprise. Captain Sullenberger successfully landed on the Hudson River, Sarah reminded him. Other pilots have used highways during emergencies. We need to consider every possible option. She studied the GPS display carefully, looking for suitable landing sites within their glide envelope. There, she pointed to the screen. Interstate 70 runs east-west through this area. I can see a section with minimal curves and light traffic. It's approximately 38 miles from our current position. Can we glide that far? Thompson asked. Sarah quickly performed glide ratio calculations in her head. From 32,000 feet, a Boeing 737 can glide approximately 100 miles under ideal conditions. We're currently at 24,000 feet, which gives us a theoretical range of about 75 miles. The highway is definitely within our capabilities if we manage our energy properly. What do you recommend? Rodriguez asked, accepting her as part of the team. First, we need to redistribute passenger weight to optimize our center of gravity, Sarah explained. Have the flight attendants move everyone to the forward section of the cabin. This will reduce tail drag and improve our glide performance. Rodriguez immediately picked up the intercom. Flight attendants, please move all passengers to the front half of the aircraft immediately. This will help with our emergency landing procedures. In the cabin, confusion and fear increased as passengers realized they were being relocated for reasons related to their emergency situation. Why do we need to move forward? Mike asked Jenny desperately. What's really happening to us? Jenny tried to maintain her professional composure while helping people relocate. We're preparing for an emergency landing. The crew needs everyone in the forward section to balance the aircraft properly. Please move quickly and help others who need assistance. Passengers began moving toward the front rows, many crying and some praying aloud. Lisa, the young mother, clutched her baby tightly as she moved to a new seat. The elderly passengers needed help from younger travelers to relocate their belongings. Back in the cockpit, Sarah continued developing their emergency plan. We need to maintain a clean configuration as long as possible, she advised. Don't deploy flaps or landing gear until we're absolutely certain we can reach our landing site. Early configuration will cause us to fall short. When should we start our approach configuration? Rodriguez asked. Not until we have the landing site in sight and we're completely sure we can make it there, Sarah replied firmly. If we configure too early and fall short, we'll crash in a field or forest with no chance of survival. She pointed to specific details on the GPS display. This section of Interstate 70 runs almost perfectly east-west. If we approach from the west, we'll have a slight headwind component that will help us control our touchdown speed. What about traffic on the highway? Thompson asked. We need emergency services to close the highway immediately, Sarah said. Captain, you should declare our intentions to air traffic control right now. Rodriguez keyed his radio microphone. Kansas City approach, Flight 447 Heavy. We have lost both engines and cannot reach any suitable airport. We are planning an emergency landing on Interstate 70, approximately 20 miles west of Junction City, Kansas. Request immediate emergency services response and highway closure. The air traffic controller's voice reflected his shock at this unprecedented situation. Flight 447, confirm you are planning to land on a highway. Both engines are completely inoperative. Affirmative on both questions, Rodriguez replied. Dual engine failure, total loss of power. We are in a powerless glide situation. Request immediate coordination with local emergency services for highway closure and rescue equipment positioning. Roger, Flight 447. Emergency services are being notified immediately. Highway closure procedures are being initiated now. Please advise souls on board and current fuel status. 143 souls on board, Thompson responded. Fuel quantity is irrelevant since we have no engines to burn it, but we're carrying approximately 11,000 pounds, which affects our landing weight. Sarah continued analyzing their situation. The fuel weight will increase our approach speed and landing roll distance, but we can't dump fuel without engine power. We'll just have to account for the heavier landing weight in our calculations. She studied the GPS display again. Current altitude 18,000 feet. Distance to highway approximately 32 miles. We're still in good shape if we maintain optimal glide speed and configuration. At 15,000 feet, the highway became visible through the cockpit windows. Sarah used binoculars from the emergency equipment kit to study their planned landing site. I can see Interstate 70 clearly now, she reported. The straight section is even longer than I expected, probably 4 miles of usable distance. There are construction barriers along both sides, which actually helps us because it indicates reduced traffic volume. What will our approach profile look like? Rodriguez asked. We'll make a long, straight-in approach, Sarah explained. We need to treat this like a precision instrument approach to a short runway. We configure late to maintain glide distance, establish a stabilized approach path, and aim for touchdown in the first quarter of the available distance. What about our approach speed? Thompson asked. We'll be landing approximately 25 knots faster than normal due to our heavy weight, Sarah calculated. That means a longer rollout distance, but we have plenty of runway length available. At 12,000 feet, they could see emergency vehicles positioning along the highway. Police cars were blocking traffic at multiple points. Fire trucks and ambulances were staged near the planned touchdown area. Emergency services are in position, air traffic control reported. Highway is closed for 8 miles in both directions. All traffic has been cleared from your landing area. Sarah called for the approach checklist. At 8,000 feet, We'll begin our configuration sequence. Flaps 5 degrees initially, then landing gear at 4,000 feet, then full flaps at 1,500 feet above ground level. The approach was looking excellent, but everyone knew they would have only one opportunity to get it right. Altitude 8,000 feet, Rodriguez announced. Beginning approach configuration now. Flaps 5, Sarah called out. The aircraft's nose pitched down slightly as the flaps extended, but their glide path remained stable and controllable. Airspeed 155 knots, descent rate 1,100 feet per minute, Thompson reported. Looking good so far. At 4,000 feet above ground level, Sarah called for the landing gear. The aircraft shuddered slightly as the wheels extended into the slipstream, creating additional drag but also helping slow their approach speed. Landing gear down and locked, Thompson confirmed. 3 green lights. Emergency vehicles lined both sides of the highway as they descended through 2,000 feet. Sarah could see dozens of fire trucks, ambulances, police cars, and emergency personnel waiting for their arrival. Full flaps, she ordered at 1,500 feet above ground level. The Boeing 737 was now fully configured for landing, descending toward the highway at 145 knots indicated airspeed. Altitude 1,000 feet above ground level, Rodriguez announced. We are perfectly aligned with the center line of Interstate 70. Sarah coached Rodriguez through the final approach phase. Excellent work, Captain. Hold this exact airspeed and descent rate. You're doing great. At 500 feet, they had a perfect view of their landing site. The highway stretched ahead of them like a concrete runway. Call out our altitude, Rodriguez requested. 400 feet, Sarah announced. Looking perfect. 300 feet, 200 feet, 100 feet, she continued. Start your flare now. Rodriguez gradually pulled back on the control yoke, raising the aircraft's nose to reduce their rate of descent for touchdown. 50 feet, 40, 30, 20, 10, Sarah counted down the final moments. The main landing gear touched the highway surface with a satisfying thump and the screech of rubber on concrete. The aircraft bounced once lightly, then settled firmly on the roadway. Touchdown, Sarah shouted. Maximum braking. Rodriguez stood on the brake pedals while Sarah helped maintain directional control. The Boeing 737 rolled down Interstate 70 for nearly a mile before gradually slowing to a complete stop. The cabin exploded with cheers, applause, crying, and expressions of relief. Passengers hugged each other and thanked God for their survival. They had lived through an impossible situation. Emergency vehicles immediately surrounded the aircraft as flight attendants opened the emergency exits and deployed evacuation slides. All 143 people evacuated safely onto the highway within 4 minutes. As passengers gathered on the concrete, many learned for the first time that the quiet woman from Seat 12B had played a crucial role in saving their lives. Sarah Chin had transformed from an anonymous passenger reading a cooking magazine into the expert whose knowledge made the difference between catastrophe and miraculous survival. The successful Interstate 70 landing became a textbook example of crew resource management, emergency procedures, and the importance of utilizing all available expertise during crisis situations. Sarah's willingness to reveal her identity and step forward when needed demonstrated the dedication and professionalism that defines commercial aviation. Standing on the highway, surrounded by grateful passengers and emergency responders, Sarah realized this would be a vacation she would never forget. Sometimes heroes are sitting quietly right beside us, ready to act when lives depend on their courage and skill.